Hi everyone, it's Crafty Mama Dawn again. I'm going to continue from where I left off in my first video for my second one. My company's name is DBD Crafts. You can find my art on my Etsy shop under the same name. So here I'm showing you again that I did do the pre-prep of taping the bottom of my canvas. This is a continuation of my first video. Excuse me. I have I have my paint cup from my first pour, and I will start another cup, but I will end up reusing that. So we're gonna do a dirty pour flip cup with a swipe. So it's another technique. I haven't adjusted my cookie racks yet. I still haven't figured out that they're attached incorrectly. I'm using the same palette. This palette is completely out of my normal palette. I don't decorate with these colors. I do with the teal, but I don't decorate with oranges and things like that. But I really wanted to try things that I was unfamiliar with, just to show that taking that risk is okay. So instead of putting the black in my paint formula, and I'm using those same colors, teal, orange, pink, and the copper metallic, and instead of using the black in the paint mixture, I'm going to swipe the black over the top of it. So these are the same paints that we mixed up in the first video. They each have 2 to 3 drops of the Spot On treadmill silicone oil. These are a combination of different brands of acrylic paints with a Floetrol and Elmer's glue mix. So I've got equal parts of each with water to thin. I like my paint a little bit thinner than most pour artists. I'm adding a metallic silver in here in addition to the copper. I don't know if it really made a big difference in the end result. It translated, I think, more like white, but it did put that sheen from the metallic in it. Now I'm going to stick my stir stick in and do what is just called a simple stir. It's a great way to make mud. I have to point that out, so be really careful when you do that, especially with these colors. The copper already looks like mud. We're doing a flip cup, so again, hold that firmly and flip it over, and then let that cup sit for 1 minute so that all of the paint can work its way through the cup and onto the canvas. As I said, I still have not figured out that my racks are not on the bin correctly. I use gloves. I didn't state this before. This is just acrylic paints. There's nothing harmful. They're water-based. There's easy cleanup. I wear the gloves because I don't like the paint to get in my fingernails, and I don't like it to get in my ring. I work primarily in fabrics for a living, so having paint all over my hands is dangerous. Making sure that it's dry. So gloves are essential for me. So I'm going to go ahead and lift it up here, and it's going to look real pastel-y because we didn't use a dark contrast yet. So all of the colors were very light. That is called a drag, where you slide the cup up and then pull it off at an angle like that. Immediately you can see cells, and we're going to torch out the air bubbles. And remember that we're using a medium flame with about 2 inches distance between the torch and the paint, and just swiftly moving over it to pop the bubbles. We're not working on cell creation or anything like that. If you don't get the bubbles out when the bubble pops, you're going to end up with a bare spot of canvas. So it's really helpful. You can use a match, you can use a, what do they call the little lighter, just, you can use a toothpick, honestly, to pop the bubbles. The torch is actually just the quickest and easiest way. So now I'm just going to pour it off the edges like I would normally on any other pour. You can see that there's no contrast really, it's all the same lightness on the paint. In the background of the video, you're going to see my dogs running around. There is one of them. I have a Doberman and I have a Pekingese Maltese blend, and oftentimes they are in my studio with me. And I don't have a very large studio, so having the dogs underfoot is an obstacle for sure. They get to playing here, so it was so loud that I actually needed to do a voiceover. So now I'm going to do a ribbon pour with the rest of the paint. I really don't think that I needed to do it, but it does add an extra element of texture. You can and you can't. It's all up to you, however you want to do it. We're going to do a black swipe over the top of it, so this ended up being pretty much a futile waste of time here. But when you do a pour from the cup like this, no matter how thick or thin your strand of paint that you're pouring on that, it's full of cells. And if you hit those lines with a torch, the cells even get larger. I have a note here about what I wanted to say. I still haven't figured out the racks, so they're going to be slipping and sliding around. Also, the camera angle is the same as the last one. I have not moved my selfie stick, and I could not find my tripod, so I've ordered a new tripod, and the videos shot after this day will be from a tripod mount and a little closer to the actual work. So now I'm trying to pull cells out of those ribbon pours that I put on there. And so when you get to this point, it's really important to know this is just paint. It's going to dry, and if you don't like it, then you just paint over it. So a swipe requires a contrasting color be poured at the top of it. You could see I poured it straight from my pre-mixed black paint, which is Artist Loft Flow acrylics mixed with Elmer's glue and some water. There's no silicone in that. And I got a palette knife, and I'm just going to swipe down that black over the top of my painting. And it's a terrifying thing. It's terrifying to take everything that you just did and put black over the top of it and cover it entirely. But as you can see, the paint reaction creates this beautiful laced effect. And it doesn't matter how many times you swipe over it, it will still pop through with this beautiful lace effect. So as I am swiping, so that there aren't big bodies of black paint, you can see all of the cells. They just show up. And taking a risk like pouring a black over your painting, it's just paint. Remember, it's just paint. If you don't like it, if it doesn't turn out how you wanted it to, let it dry. Use an alcohol wipe to remove any silicone oil residue, and then pour over it again. A lot of people reprime and all that kind of stuff. I don't. I just literally pour over it again. It's like a wall color. If you don't like it, repaint it. So now I'm going to use the torch again, and you can see on the black it is creating a few more cells and some really pretty effects. When I bring the camera in for a close-up, it's really stunning. By adding the yellow, I've created some beautiful green hues, And that bronze and the orange, where it could have looked a lot like mud, is now really attractive together. I can see a little bit of the silver metallic, but it wasn't really enough to really notice that I put silver in there. You'll see me walk around my island several times. I'm checking the opposite side of the painting when I do that without picking it up. So what you see in the background of my studio from this angle, I am a garment producer. I make graphic tees such as the one I'm wearing. And so everything in this part of my studio is garment related. So I have to be very careful with my work, which is why I work in the bin instead of covering my island with plastic and then working on top of that. If I were to have had a spill, the paint would have dripped right onto the carpet. So now I'm going to bring the camera down for a close-up, and you can see all of the cells, the lacing, the colors. Look at the orange popping up in the middle of the green cells. It's just really pretty. In the future, I will try to slow down on this step so that you can really let the camera focus and take a look at it. But this is called a swipe, and it's a fun thing to do. All right, so on to the next step. All of the paint drippings on the bottom of the tray there, you're going to get some really pretty detail and texture and cells as the waste. And I just am not a wasteful person. So I showed you the canvas boards that I had at the ready. And the reason that I use these canvas boards or have them there is so that I could do a junk pour. Basically, I'm going to take that canvas upside down and lay it into that paint. And everything that I just did is going to transfer onto that canvas. All of those paint drippings have silicone oil in them. There's all sorts of colors. When I move the board over the top of it, it creates cells and texture. And I have enough paint down there that I can actually do several of these, and I do. So I'm going to push that original painting up to the top of that and then lay that there. And I'm going to go back in with my palette knife, scrape up some more, excuse me, drip it along, fill in the gaps. It's amazing how forgiving this art form is. You can change it by swiping another color through it, or dripping another color onto it, or dragging a stick through it, or blowing on it through a straw. You really can change the entire appearance of your finished piece. So I showed you that I use these bins and these cookie sheets. You can see that I've stacked the cooling racks one on top of the other to access under it. When I am finished with my paintings, I literally just pick up that top cooling rack and place it in a bin and put the lid on and let it dry. It makes it so that I can do several paintings in a row and then put them away so that the dogs can't knock them over, or they won't get dog hair or dust or particles from my fibers that I work with, because you really don't want particles landing on your paint. So I've got another canvas board out here because there's more than enough paint to do another dipping into the waste down there. What you can also do is let that parchment paper dry. If you use a surface like tinfoil or plastic or parchment paper or silicone sheet, that paint will literally dry and you can peel it up. I make additional things like pieces of jewelry with the skins of the wasted paint. So nothing is wasted in my world. I apologize. I have got something in my throat today. As I mentioned, I don't have a lot of room in my studio. So we joke it's a one-butt hallway around my studio. Alright, so I'm going to dip again, and I'm going into that black over to the side even, from the very first pour that I did. And it's still very wet because it takes a good 12 to 24 hours for these canvases to dry. So that paint sitting down there is just a few hours old and very usable. So I'm just going to swirl some things around, and then I get an idea, oh, let's add some colors. So I'm just going to drip in some other colors that we were working with, because pretty much that's just a solid gray. I might even grab colors out of my bottles. I can't remember. But I'm just going to pour them on there. I will torch. That will change the effect a little bit. I'm going to do a white swipe here and see what happens. This is all just safe play. This is how you learn what the paints are going to do with each other, what the chemical reaction is going to be. If you don't like it, you let it dry, you use an alcohol wipe, and you paint over the top of it. There's really no risk of failure here. So experiment with different techniques. There's that darn sheet that I still haven't figured out I've got on there wrong. So now you can see the cells from the white swipe. So at first we did a black swipe, now we've done a white swipe, and I'm going to pour some on the other end and swipe up to the middle and see if I can get the same look that I got on the top of that. I didn't really use a lot of white the first time. My hand is pretty weak at this point from squeezing all of these bottles. I definitely need to take a break. I have a very weak right hand. So there is swiping of the white. You can do anything. This is the time, like I said, to play. You're not using paint up that you wouldn't have. Look at the cells on the back of the palette knife. I just absolutely love the creation of cells, and I love to torch. So you will see me every opportunity I get to use that torch, it's going on there, because it can change the way it looks. And knowing when to say when, that's not in my vocabulary much of the time, so I run the risk of ruining paintings all the time, and I really don't care because I can paint over it. So I would rather try to figure out how to do stuff by experimenting than always make perfect paintings. I have a friend and a mentor and teacher of mine, Jean Oliver. If you don't know who she is, look her up. She's a beautiful artist and person, and she says the only way to make good art is by making bad art. And so I am a master of bad art because I experiment, and as a result I have some really pretty, beautiful art pieces. So here we are just experimenting, and it's totally safe. It doesn't affect anything. The piece that I wanted to turn out is already in another bin drying. This is just extra. And I'm just going to continue to add colors to it and swipe through it until I have a look that I really want. Again, I want to remind you the paint mixture that I use. Normally I use Elmer's Glue All, equal parts glue to paint and then water to thin. Today in this pour I've added equal parts Floetrol, paint, and Elmer's glue, and I wanted to see the difference between the Elmer's glue and the Floetrol. There's 2 to 3 drops of silicone oil in each 6-ounce cup of paint, not a lot of oil. Here I'm using my craft stick to just swirl through it, and this turns out to be the end result. I actually really like how it turned out at this point, and I will set it off to dry. I find that it's really pretty. Oh, I have to torch first, of course. Torching is the bomb. Yeah. Goodness. I don't think that the torching did anything at that particular junction of the painting. I think all of the experimentation has been done with the torch. It actually dries looking exactly like it is right now. So there is no further cell production or anything that happens on this particular piece. I don't know where I've gone in the video. I'm probably getting something that I think I need. So let's see. Oh, there's that stupid blaster spray. So in my paint medium mixture, this does not work with my pouring medium. I'm going to do it here, and it didn't affect this painting, but I think it's because I had already manipulated it so much. At the end of this video there are several photos of these finished pieces, and the one from yesterday, or I'm sorry, not yesterday, the first video that I uploaded where I sprayed the blaster on there off camera and it destroyed the painting. So you're going to see the big voids of color that it left. So now on my junk, I'm looking at it and trying to determine, how do I want that to dry? Do I want those big blobs of white? Should I mix it up a little bit so that the white is incorporated? All of the ripples is going to dry in a ripple, and that will affect the way it looks. But the skins, when they dry, when this acrylic paint dries, it's really thick looking on the canvas, but when it dries you can actually see the texture of the canvas underneath it. So it dries very thin and flat. The same for the skins. You can hole punch them. You can cut them, you can die cut them, you can do whatever you want with the skins. And both sides look completely different. One side's going to have cells and the other side is going to have some texture. And sometimes I use the bottom side and sometimes I use the top side. So I'm sitting here telling you about basically the waste and how to use it. So here are the pictures. This is the first pour from my first video, and I realized that my camera is tipped wrong. Sorry about that. And I'm using an aught light. All of the white that you see is where the silicone oil is removing or spreading the paint out. So it's really sad. This is that one that I was just working on with the swirls, and it did not do it to that board. It's very interesting. So these have been drying for about 5 hours. You can see that they're still wet, but that the edges are starting to dry, and you can see the texture of the canvas below it. This is how that ended up. It was completely destroyed. All of that white. Yeah, that's really pretty. And then these are my 2 wasted pours. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it.